Beyond the Gate spoilers for Friday, August 8th, 2025 tease that Jacob unexpectedly discovers a devastating truth about Kenya, truth so dangerous that it should have been buried forever. Since Kenny's mysterious death, Elon and Martin have been moving cautiously, each decision weighing like a ticking time bomb. Their steps are cautious, quiet, reserved. But there's one thing they can't contain: Jacob's intense desire to seek justice, no matter the cost. Jacob, Elon's son, is sharp, passionate, and principled. He inherited Elon's strategic mind, but none of his willingness to compromise when it comes to morality. Jacob doesn't just want the truth, needs it. Elon, knowing how explosive the real story is, especially for someone like Jacob, has done everything in his power to keep it locked away. But nothing stays buried forever. When the official decision to close Kenny's case came from Elon, Jacob was blindsided. There were no answers, no suspects, no closure. The way Elon wrapped it up so abruptly made Jacob's blood run cold. He knew something was off. Elon's advice to stay in his lane only fueled Jacob's instincts to dig deeper. Elon had warned, "It'll stain that shirt of yours, Jacob." What Elon feared the most was Jacob getting involved in a world he couldn't unsee. And yet, Jacob couldn't help himself. On the other side of the storm, Martin is cracking. Once a man of controlled composure, he now wakes drenched in sweat, haunted by shadows of Kenny's fate. Ted sees this. Ted, always the silent enforcer, has watched his friend unravel for weeks. He realizes Martin is on the edge, about to fall into the abyss of his own guilt. So Ted makes a brutal decision: eliminate the ghost. Of course, Ted can't operate alone. Behind him stands a cabal of influential figures with vested interests in keeping the past silent. These are the real decision-makers. And when Kenny's name resurfaces as a threat, they give Ted their silent blessing to act. But Kenny's disappearance wasn't what they thought it was. He hadn't vanished. He had escaped. And Ted now moves quietly, like a shadow with a knife, determined to end what was never truly finished. Meanwhile, Smitty stumbles upon the truth. Something Martin never wanted to happen. He accidentally uncovers evidence tied directly to Kenny's death. Smitty confronts Martin, and the resulting tension nearly breaks them both. Martin, broken but desperate, pleads with Smitty to keep the secret for the sake of their families. Though furious, Smitty ultimately agrees. But something in him changes. Trust erodes. Loyalty twists. It won't be the same. Jacob, unaware of Smitty's inner conflict, continues to dig. He clashes constantly with Marcel, who represents the old guard loyal to Elon, skeptical of Jacob's rebellious streak. Their arguments get heated. Marcel sees Jacob as naive, dangerous, a threat to everything they've tried to protect. But Jacob isn't blind. He senses Marcel's discomfort and starts tracing lines between names. One of those names is Joey. Jacob remembers Joey from the old files. And then, to his shock, he finds out that Marcel has more than just a passing connection with Joey. There's a financial link. A partnership. Maybe more. Jacob, driven by intuition, starts following Joey's network. It's not long before he realizes Bill is also involved. Bill, whose presence was always low-key, suddenly becomes a key piece. Jacob sees the pattern. Joey connects to Bill. Bill connects to Kenny. Kenny connects to the past. And the past is where the truth hides. Everything clicks into place, and Jacob runs to Elon. He lays out his concerns, trying to reason, still believing there's some misunderstanding. Elon listens quietly, expression unreadable. Then he doubles down. He tells Jacob to back off. Not just as a father. As a warning. You were given a job, Elon tells him. Stick to it. These are not your waters to swim in. But Jacob refuses to be silenced. That same night, he starts tailing Elon. It's a risky move, but necessary. Jacob hides in shadows, follows carefully, hears what he isn't supposed to hear. He catches Elon in a heated discussion with Bill. The words money, Kenny, and payoff are uttered. Jacob's heart drops. It's like glass shattering. The father he idolized, the man of principles and steal a lie. A man tied to the very corruption he warned Jacob about. Jacob reels. His world tilts. He wants to run. But more than that, he wants to confront. That night, Jacob sits alone. He remembers every lesson Elon taught him about justice, truth, and responsibility. The irony burns. And he knows now Elon isn't just part of the problem. He is the problem. And somehow, all of this loops back to Martin Richardson. Martin's role had always been murky. To Jacob, he was just another of his father's trusted allies. But as puzzle pieces fall into place, Jacob sees Martin differently. The connection between Martin and Kenny is undeniable. And whatever Kenny knew, whatever he was about to expose, cost him his life. The corruption runs deeper than Jacob feared. It's not just a single bad decision. It's a system. A network. One that his father belongs to. One that tried to silence Kenny. And now one that sees Jacob as a liability. Jacob's next move could destroy everything: his relationship with Elon, the career he was building, and maybe even his life. But staying silent would make him just as guilty. That's a weight he can't carry. As Jacob starts gathering proof, others start to notice. Ted, especially. The enforcer. The shadow. He starts tracking Jacob the same way Jacob tracked Elon. Ted doesn't report back. He acts on instinct. And his instinct says Jacob is about to blow it all up. At the same time, Marcel, growing increasingly anxious, confides in Ted. He tells him that Jacob suspects too much. That Jacob thinks they're corrupt. Ted plays it cool, but his wheels are turning. One thing is clear: Jacob has become a threat. Jacob knows he's running out of time. The deeper he goes, the more he sees that the web of lies is tighter than he thought. The conspiracy doesn't just involve Elon, Martin, Ted, and Bill. It's wider. It reaches into law enforcement, city planning, campaign financing, even medical records. Every time Jacob finds a piece, it leads to another, like a hydra with endless heads. And the question that haunts him: who was Kenny really? Was he just a victim? Or was he something more? A whistleblower? A mole? A pawn? The pressure mounts. Jacob can feel it, like a vice around his throat. He starts to see things differently. Conversations take on new meanings. Glances become threats. Silence becomes dangerous. One night, Jacob gets a message. Anonymous. No name. Just a location. And a time. He knows it's probably a trap. But he goes anyway. Because Jacob understands something now. He's crossed a line. There is no turning back. Not for him. Not for Elon. Not for any of them. Not since Kenny. Jacob stepped into the shadows of the abandoned warehouse at the edge of the docks, the location from the anonymous message. It reeked of rust, oil, and decay. His pulse thudded with every echoing footstep. The air was thick with something unspoken. Then a whisper of movement. A figure emerged. Not Ted. Not Marcel. But Smitty. The shock froze Jacob. Smitty looked different, worn down, bitter, as if something had been consuming him from the inside out. Without preamble, he said, "You were never supposed to find out." None of us were. But now that you know, you're in it, Jacob. Just like the rest of us. Smitty revealed the part of the truth he'd kept buried for Martin's sake. That Kenny had discovered something massive, a secret Martin once tried to warn Elon about, but was pressured to bury. Kenny wasn't just digging, he had proof. Financial records. Meeting logs. Audio tapes. Enough to bring the whole network down. And he intended to use it. But he never got the chance. Ted, Smitty muttered, eyes low, was the one who stopped him. Jacob's stomach turned. The name hit like a cold slap. Smitty didn't say the word murder, but he didn't have to. Kenny had been silenced. And Martin, out of fear and guilt, had let it happen. Elon, with his hands already stained by other decisions, chose to protect the lie instead of face the truth. Jacob left the warehouse with more weight than he could carry. He knew now that exposing the truth wouldn't just destroy reputations. It would collapse entire lives. Families. His own father. And yet, the idea of staying silent made his skin crawl. Meanwhile, Ted was already tightening his net. After learning about the meeting through a listening device planted on Marcel, he knew Smitty had talked. That meant Jacob had the full picture. Ted didn't bother asking for orders. He started making moves to erase loose ends, beginning with Smitty. Smitty went off the grid the next day. No calls. No messages. Gone. Jacob tried contacting Martin, but Martin wasn't answering either. Guilt had swallowed him whole. He was spiraling, lost in hallucinations of Kenny's voice, appearing in mirrors on the street, whispering from shadows. He isolated himself, drinking too much, trusting no one. Ted approached Marcel next, framing the situation in terms of protection. If Jacob goes public, it's not just Elon who burns. We all go down. You. Me. Joey. Even Bill. He's already preparing to disappear. Are you? Marcel wasn't ready. He'd never signed up for this level of rot. Corruption was one thing. Collateral damage was something else. But Ted left him no room for doubt. If you can't keep Jacob in check, I will. Jacob, meanwhile, kept pushing forward. He returned to Elon's office late at night, accessing a drawer only he knew about. Inside were USB drives. Password locked, but nothing Jacob couldn't crack. What he found confirmed everything Smitty had said and more. Elon hadn't just covered up Kenny's death, had helped orchestrate it under pressure from the shadow group Ted worked with. It was a trade. Kenny for silence. Kenny for protection. One file in particular stopped Jacob cold, a video recording of a conversation between Joey and Bill. In it, Joey admitted to manipulating Kenny, feeding him just enough information to keep him digging, knowing Ted would take care of the problem. Marcel was mentioned as the go-between. Elon? He never said a word, but his name was invoked with reverence. They called him the Shield. Jacob backed away from the screen, nauseated. He realized something terrifying. His father had once believed in doing the right thing. But somewhere along the way, he had decided that protecting the bigger picture was more important than any individual life. Even Kenny's. Desperate for some kind of ally, Jacob confronted Marcel one last time. This time, not with accusations, but a question. Why? Marcel didn't dodge. He told Jacob the truth. That they had built something important, powerful, maybe even necessary. But people like Kenny were dangerous because they didn't see the bigger picture. They didn't understand the cost. And now you do, Marcel said, with a look that was more pity than threat. Jacob left without speaking. Marcel watched him go, unsure if he'd just signed his own death sentence. Across town, Martin finally cracked. He recorded a confession. Everything. From the day Kenny brought him the files, to the night Ted came to his house with bloody hands. Martin said names. Dates. Even described a meeting in a government building that was supposed to be secure. He sent it to one person, Jacob. But Jacob never received the message. Ted did. By morning, Martin Richardson was dead. Officially, it was suicide. Jacob knew better. He barely had time to grieve before the next hammer fell. Elon summoned him. Not in private, but in public, during a press briefing. He praised Jacob for his integrity, then announced his decision to step down from leadership, passing the torch to his son. It was calculated. A trap wrapped in flattery. After the cameras left, father and son stood alone. You know what happens if you go public, Elon said quietly. The people who helped Kenny? They're already gone. The ones still here? They're too big to touch. All you'll do is get yourself killed. Or worse, ignored. So I should do nothing? Jacob asked, voice raw. You should lead, Elon replied. And change things from the inside. That's the only way. But Jacob didn't answer. Because even now, he wasn't sure if that was a compromise or just another lie. Ted, watching from afar, knew the moment of decision was near. He had already arranged for Jacob's accident, if necessary. But something held him back. Maybe it was respect. Maybe curiosity. Or maybe he wanted to see if Jacob would follow in his father's footsteps and become the next Shield. Elon waited too. For the first time unsure. Joey, far away now, sent one final message. a smirk, and a sentence. There are no clean exits. Only timing. Jacob sat alone that night, staring at the files, the video, the confession that was never delivered. He replayed Kenny's name over and over in his mind. Not just as a victim, but as a reminder. He thought about Smitty, about Martin, about the silence they were forced into, about Ted's eyes, always watching. And he thought about Elon. He stood. And he made a choice. The choice Jacob made that night wasn't about vengeance. It wasn't even about justice, not entirely. It was about something deeper, reclaiming the truth before it was buried again. At dawn, he drove to a private location in off-the-grid radio tower once used for emergency broadcasts. He had the drive, the audio recordings, Martin's final confession, and copies of every file he'd found. As the sun climbed over the horizon, Jacob stood in front of the transmitter, ready to speak. He knew this would put a target on his back. But it would also unmake the illusion. He began broadcasting. Every name, every date, every betrayal. His voice was steady, but his hands trembled. He knew what this meant for Elon. For everyone who had lived comfortably under the illusion of control. Within the hour, every journalist with reach had picked up the signal. The files were mirrored online. Archived. Spread like wildfire. Back at Central Command, Ted received the alert. His reaction was still. Cold. But behind his eyes, fury. Elon? Ted asked over the secure line. Silence. Elon was watching the same broadcast. He didn't speak. Not at first. Then he said, almost to himself, he did it. The broadcast was a bomb. Joey, now out of reach, went completely dark. Bill disappeared within the hour. Marcel? He tried to pivot, to frame himself as a whistleblower, but Jacob had already implicated him clearly. There was no room to maneuver. And Smitty reappeared. The moment Jacob's message went live, Smitty resurfaced in a public hospital. Beaten. Bruised. But alive. He requested police protection and handed over a secondary copy of Martin's confession. Confirmation. Corroboration. Martin was gone. But his voice was now a matter of record. The public reaction was explosive. Citizens demanded accountability. Protests filled streets. Investigations were launched. Elon, once revered, was now under a full inquiry. He didn't fight it. Didn't speak. He simply turned himself in, walked through the lobby of the federal courthouse, and nodded as the cameras flashed. Jacob stood in the crowd. Watching. Alone. Reporters asked him if he hated his father. If he regretted it. If he would do it all again. Jacob answered only once. It was never about hate. It was about the truth. Ted vanished. No arrest. No statement. Nothing. But Jacob knew he hadn't disappeared. Men like Ted didn't vanish. They repositioned. Jacob kept looking over his shoulder, every shadow a threat. But strangely, there were no attempts. No warnings. Just silence. He returned to his office weeks later. A new team. A clean slate. And a fractured system in desperate need of repair. Jacob never called himself a hero. He hated the word. He'd lost too much to wear it comfortably. Martin. Trust. Family. The man his father had once been. But in quiet moments, he thought of Kenny. Of the files he had buried, but never burned. Of the warnings he tried to give. And of the courage it took to go up against giants. Jacob had given Kenny something he was never allowed, a voice. And in doing so, he made sure no one would forget what had been done.